This can be seen as a pretty interesting move. It can be seen as a mistake. It can be seen as disappointing. Let's dive into the newest general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs, John Chayka. Now, this 20-minute video by Steve Dangle that's on Google when you search for John Chayka's name is a pretty good one. And essentially the main thesis about this video is that John Chayka, current Toronto Maple Leafs general manager, just hired today, this is a guy that is only 36 years old right now. Which means when he was the GM of the Arizona Coyotes once upon a time, he was young, really, really young. 2016-17 was Chayka's first year as Arizona GM. He was 27 years old. There were players in the league that were older than this guy by a decade when this guy was in that GM seat in Arizona. Now, it's been a decade. He hasn't been a GM since 2020, where he left the Arizona Coyotes July 26. And now, 6 years later, this is his time to shine as the GM of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Matt Sundin got brought on as the senior advisor. Both of these hirings have been confirmed as of this morning. Keith Pelley's statement went out there and said this: I am thrilled to welcome John and Matt to their roles, two great hockey minds that will strengthen our entire hockey club. From the start of this process, it's been about building a championship-caliber team for our fans and our city, and today is an important step towards that goal. Now, here's the thing. If you head over to the Toronto Maple Leafs sub and you take a look at what some fans are saying about the hiring of John Chayka, obviously there is a lot of joy that Matt Sundin is back in a Toronto Maple Leafs, I was going to say sweater, but, you know, technically the GMs and whatnot, they don't wear sweaters, they wear suits. But Matt Sundin is back in the organization, that's cool. Top Reply says, I gave Brad Treliving a chance when he was first hired, so I'm going to do the same for Chayka. However, it is very disappointing that with all the resources, financial and otherwise, that Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment has, this was the candidate they decided on. Necessary Purple says, I'm more upset that Keith Pelley will still be making hockey decisions than the fact that Chayka was hired. This is the biggest problem. A guy with no actual skill in this area, but also not seemingly intelligent enough to realize he should leave things like this to others. The Thorough Crocodile said, I'm going to give them a chance too, but my biggest worry is that they gave him the job because he was the best candidate who had agreed to let them dictate whether we keep Matthews and Nylander or not. 6God801 said, thank you. Even after trading Tkachuk for Huberdeau and the disaster class in Calgary, people said they were fine with Brad Treliving. John Chayka and his crew were new and had no experience in Arizona. 10 years later, he's got experience and is probably more wiser. We have seen members of the Old Boys Club do some of the dumbest moves ever. Chayka doesn't have any awful moves on his resume. If y'all give Treliving a fair chance, you need to give Chayka a chance here too. Let's see where the lottery balls fall, and we go from there. He has months here to draw up a plan and the direction. Now, with that said, let's look at John Chayka's trade history over here. The very last move that he did as the Arizona Coyotes general manager was acquiring Marcus Hannikainen from the Columbus Blue Jackets for a 7th. The second most previous trade was actually a really big one. It was the Taylor Hall trade, where the Coyotes were acquiring a heart-winning, potentially elite player in Taylor Hall, who, I'm not going to say that he's not elite, but there was a really good season that Taylor Hall had once upon a time with New Jersey, and that was the kind of guy that Arizona was thinking they were acquiring here. It was a pretty big deal, but I would be real, none of these guys have been amazing in New Jersey ever since. Kevin Ball, I guess, is the closest to it. But you have the Comrie Sarajari trade, you have Galchenyuk for Kessel, you have Jordan Wheel, Michael Chaput, Jordan Wheel for a 6th-round pick, Nick Schmaltz for Dylan Strome and Brendan Perlini. This actually was a pretty good deal that worked out for the Arizona Coyotes. Nick Schmaltz is still in Utah today, and he's a pretty effective player. And then you have some of these other bigger moves. Marcus Kruger, Mackenzie Entwistle, Andrew Campbell for Vinny Hinostroza, Jordan Osterley, Marian Hossa, Domi for Galchenyuk. That was a pretty good one. I'd say that the Montreal Canadiens came out with a pretty good player. And then you have all these other trades here too. No extremely bad moves. Nothing that will knock your socks off. I mean, Scott Wedgwood for Darcy Kemper. In 2018, that trade wasn't really that big of a deal. But if it's like today, you're looking at it like, wait a minute, wasn't Scott Wedgwood the guy who led the NHL in save percentage? And isn't Darcy Kemper still in LA today? It's like, yeah, there's a lot of movement that happens with these goalies, but not necessarily a terrible resume. It's just a lot of people didn't have that much confidence in John Chayka back in the day because of his age. And now, with a lot more years of experience, he is literally 36 now compared to the 26 he was when he was brought on in Arizona. There is a chance for him to rewrite the narrative as to what's going down. Let's read some of the other comments here on the R Leafs subreddit. This is messed up. Keith Pelley is a moron. At worst, they're all fired. Who cares? Important notes, the Maple Leafs are expected to announce their new hockey leadership later this afternoon with a media conference on Monday. Matt Sundin returns to the organization as Senior Executive Advisor, Hockey Operations. John Chayka is the new GM, and Chayka reports directly to Keith Pelley. The position the organization advertised in its interview process was Head of Hockey Operations, and that's what Chayka will be. I was so gung-ho for Sundin to be president and Chayka reporting to him. Hearing this now is a joke. I'm sorry, but being a former Leaf, even if he was the captain and the greatest Leaf of all time for many, means nothing about running the Leafs organization. Letting him call all the shots with zero front office experience would be insane. More insane than hiring a formerly suspended, pretty much snake oil salesman former GM. And yeah, we're not going to expand on that. Let's just leave it civil for now, folks. So Chayka will report directly to Keith Pelley. That's the way the ladder goes. Right on top of the GM is the president and CEO of the team, rather than Matt Sundin acting as a buffer, which is quite the interesting way to look at it. Keith doesn't want a president in any of the sports teams under MLSE, so his hands will be all over everything. No way these two are what their searching firm found for them. That's right, the Toronto Maple Leafs did hire a searching firm to go and do the hiring process for them, to look around for candidates and scour the planet, which was seen as a conflict of interest because they do represent some of the players and people that were getting interviewed, but either way, this is what they came up with. Pelley saying we don't need a rebuild and then doing this? We're cooked until he's out at MLSE. I don't know if this team will actually be competitive for like 10 years. Keith Pelley can go to hell. Keith GPT era is here. It does not look like this is a positive piece of news for the majority of Maple Leafs fans. And I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel about the John Chayka hiring and the way it seems to be laid out in Toronto? Obviously, this is going to be a wait-and-see kind of moment, but initial responses are not looking all too great. Thoughts in the comment section below. Do you agree, disagree with some of these claims? I hope you enjoyed this video. Sign on. And bye.